we both have had interesting things happen on the show. And I'm telling her the story basically of how a 3-year-old has held my show hostage, because, as 3-year-olds often do. Like, it's just the nature of the world is when you have an important event, when you want something you absolutely must do, everything else around you go, hey, you, I need you right now. And you're like, how do other people do this? Like, right?
It's a magical skill toddlers have, I think.
Yeah, it's toddlers just, well, again, it's because, again, attention's now turned on something else, not them. Hey, I'm the star of your world, and they are. That's the thing. Like, they know it. It's like I got you around my finger, no matter what. So it's just like one of those, just like, oh, okay. How do I deal with this and deal with everything I'm supposed to do? I think my favorite podcast guest literally had he had like his 1-year-old baby. He sat the 1-year-old baby right here. And we actually had a conversation, like him and his baby, for like an hour, because it only could go about an hour because the baby pooped in the middle of the conversation. So, I mean, again, as a parent, you get used to this kind of stuff, right? So kudos. I didn't know. And it's like, oh, I'm so glad I'm ending this now then, because you need to, yeah, he needs to hit his diaper. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Right.
On his end, it probably didn't smell very good.
I think there's just a certain point, and I could be wrong on this. I'm sure you're like, but there's just a certain point you just get. I'm not gonna say used to it is quite the right word, right? But it's more like it's just part of the deal, right? The babe is gonna poop. Like, that's just the way it is. I'm not even gonna notice after a while.
I had twins, so I had double that.
You double that. So they pooped. How old are your twins?
Oh, they're 17 now. They're yeah.
Okay, so oh man, so at this point, are they boys or girls?
Boys, yeah, they run the other way when they see me coming now, so it's the opposite effect.
Yeah. Well, don't get me wrong. They always think of mom, but again, at this point, they're trying to figure out our own stuff. Mom, we gotta be trying to cool and stuff. And then about 4 years later, they're going to realize they're not cool. It's going to come like it'll hit them like right here hard. I'm not cool. They're not cool. Oh man, I might as well just do all the things I tried to do not prior to being cool, and that's just how that kind of goes, So, but yeah, lots of poop, probably some spitting, and probably lots of, especially when they got to around 4 to 6 years old, they fight and break something, and you're like, okay, I got to figure out who broke this, right? My dad always said a real parent had to figure out once you had 2 kids, that's when you're a real parent, because it's pretty odd, because when something gets broken, busted, fixed, whatever, that's when you gotta actually be a parent and use your detective skills. Because you go to them, who did it? They point at each other. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't you? So.
Yeah, it couldn't be me. I'm totally innocent. It's like, are you really? How's life today? How's life treating you?
It's good for a Monday.
It's good for a Monday? Yeah. So what were you up to today?
What did I do? I ran this morning, which is my morning routine. And then, yeah, Mondays I usually block out so I don't have to talk to clients and just get work done. I have Monday and Friday like that, so I can have big blocks of time to actually think. So, yeah.
Have your own space?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important. It is important. Like for me, my Zen thing, I'm currently in Canmore, Alberta. They're really pretty mountains, so I walk throughout. I'm going to miss it because I'm probably leaving this place in about a month, which is bittersweet. I think I could definitely end up coming back to something like this in like 3 to 4 years. I'd be like, I could be talked into that. You know what I mean? I could be talked to come back here. But I feel like with everything I'm doing, all my work's going to be in a bigger city, at least in the short term. So not that Calgary's a pretty city too. Like Calgary's a pretty city. It's just not as pretty as here, So you still got announcements. You still got like mountains. But the mountains are in the distance. Whereas here, I'm literally right in the heart of them.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, that's nice. I live near the Rocky Mountains, so I know how
Whereabouts? Whereabouts?
Outside of Denver.
Okay, so you are literally south of me. Right. You're literally south of me. So you also high altitude, so you're super tough. Then I'm in Canmore, Alberta. So if you look at a map, you're like we're in the same Rocky Mountain region. I'm just in the far north end of it, and you're in the far south end of it. So
Yeah, I'd
yeah.
never make it in the cold up there. I can tell you that.
Doesn't it get cold in Denver though?
And it does, but not for long periods of time. Like we could have a 70-degree day in January, so you
Same
might
here.
get like 30 degrees for 6 days, and then the next day it'll be 70. Okay,
Sorry.
I can
Okay.
handle this.
I'm a little jealous there.
Yeah.
We do have 70 degrees sometimes in January too. It does happen. The mountain effect making things warm is we call it a Chinook up here. Imagine you have your own like name for it. It happens there too. It's just a difference of a degree. Sometimes the wind just blows a certain way, and all of a sudden you'll have like a snowstorm, and sometimes the wind will blow the other way, and it's the nicest weather in the world. And you're like, how is this in the same place at the same time? But no, when we get cold, it's like -40. So
Oh yeah, that's a little extreme.
I lived in both extremes. I lived in Arizona, like Phoenix. So Phoenix is like 40 plus, like or 120, I think would be your measurement. So 120 and -40. -40 is the same, both Celsius and Fahrenheit. So it
Okay.
doesn't really matter. It's cold at that point. So, but I've lived in both. I do prefer the heat, but I've been in the cold more. So it's just been that's been my lot in life. One day maybe happy beaches. So. Oh, let's talk a little bit here. So you are a writer, and so what's your like? How did you get in? Like, what was the story that made you go, "I am going to be a writer. I'm going to do this thing."
I didn't really start that way. I started writing when I was like 38, and I think I had a little bit of early midlife crisis or something. I was headed to my high school reunion, and I just started writing. I suffered from anorexia as a young adult, and I started thinking about that whole portion of my life in a big blob. And yeah, I just started writing it all out. And didn't write it as my story. I wrote it as a fictionalized story about a different character. And it was a little bit of entertainment too, because I had little kids and I was home with them all day. So instead of watching Netflix or reading another book, which I'm not really sure why I didn't read another book, but I just started writing the story of this character who develops anorexia and her process and her recovery from that. And I don't know that I even plan to do anything with it. I just write it, entertain myself. But I had a few friends that I sent it to, and they were like, "This is really good. You should look at this." And I had another friend who was a self-published author as well as an editor. So I gave it to her, and she helped me, or she edited it for me, and yeah, it became a 4-book series. And then after that, I just had the writing bug. Like I couldn't stop writing, and all these stories would pop up in my head. So.
So basically, you fell into it after you were ready for that, whatever that moment was for you. There was ready, like you weren't a big reader when you were a kid or anything like that.
I was a huge reader, definitely, but my genre I would have preferred was fantasy from the very beginning. I read lots of fantasy, Tolkien. I think the first fantasy series I read was Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. That was 13 books.
Al Frank Baum's Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, classic.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's cool. No, I mean, especially since like I do write kind of like a fantasy epic poetry kind of thing. So I'm reading a lot of the classical stuff right now. For me, it's Alice in Wonderland, not Oz, but still, it's a fun thing. I feel well, I sometimes like I feel like what we write, no matter what the trappings are, like I think writers always put pieces of themselves in there, and it sounds to me like for you, like I guess I would call your stuff slice of life. Is that accurate? Is that an accurate description there?
it is. That first series is, and then from there I jumped into YA fantasy.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a second. So maybe the first series, maybe because of everything you've been through and experienced, you could like there are things about that you processed and maybe even made peace with. Like I would imagine like I don't pretend to understand all the mental stuff that goes on with an anorexic, but I would imagine there's a lot of like not liking what you see in the mirror, and if the way out, if there is a full way out, again, I'm not pretending I know everything about this, is to kind of come to peace with yourself and who
I think
you
it
are.
is. It was very cathartic and it was very therapeutic, I think, for me.
Yeah. And so when you wrote it, it was like there was something very important about you in the books, and that was probably why it was so good. and you wrote it and you're like, this is really cool. And now you get to do the YA stuff because whatever is now you're like, okay, I'm comfortable with this. I got the thing that first story I really felt I needed to tell out. And then from there you kind of just stumbled on into like what you really want to do, or maybe what you're ready to do, for lack of a better term.
Maybe so. Yeah. I never thought I would be a writer. It's funny because I talk to so many authors and they say, "Oh, I love writing from the beginning. I always wrote and I hated writing. I never wanted to write until I got to grad school and I'm a scientist. I did research for a number of years and you had to write your publications and your papers, and I learned to write technical writing and then actually enjoyed that. And so by the time I started to write my story, I liked writing. At least I didn't know how to write fiction as well as the technical writing, but at least I knew how to write and I enjoyed it.
The structure of technical writing is fun. It's almost like how do I put this? It's kind of like you get this like you have like a standard, and you kind of and just following in that standard in itself is very it teaches you some really good like building blocks for discipline, and it's surprisingly creative too, for because again, because of the way it's designed, those limitations actually infuse a kind of creativity and creates discipline, which are two very understated things in fiction writing. You need both of those to do that well.
Right, definitely. I'm working on a short story that an author and I, or an illustrator and I are working on. It'll be the first time I've worked with an illustrator and he's doing the illustrations and I'm writing the story, and I have it all planned out in my head. Like, well, I didn't have it planned out in my head. Like, it was supposed to be a short story, like a short novel. And so I was writing the beginning part of it, and I always know that the beginning part needs to, you need to come to your cliffhanger at like a fourth to a third the way in, and you need to have that point where the main character decides, okay, I'm all in, I'm going for it. And I came to that point. It's so interesting at like 15,000 words. So I'm like, okay, this is perfect. Well, the second half will be at 30,000 words. So you do kind of have that structure so that readers get that build up and know your characters. And then you have all the action where it's up and down. Are they going to achieve their mission? And then you have, the finale or the wind down of seeing the character happy or not happy or whatever happens to them. But it was really interesting. Yeah, just yesterday, I'm almost at the climax part and I'm almost at 30,000 words. And I was like, oh, this is eerie. Like, it actually works.
No, it's cool though, right? Because what's happening is you're like, again, it's fiction writing is about expectations. That's what it is. Like you're crafting a story, and the structure of the story has been done to death. So what makes it interesting is your own magic little twist to the story, right? It's like, okay, what can I add to it that makes it awesome and made of cheese or something to that effect anyway? And so, it's understanding what those expectations are, and if you're going to fulfill them or if you're going to subvert them, right? Now, if you subvert them, you got to replace them with something else, and you got to have a plan for that, which is why I think a lot of authors actually probably play into expectations a lot, because it in some ways it's easier. Also, like, if the wheel ain't broke, why fix it kind of deal. Right. But that's the thing, like there's a structure to fiction writing as well. And the thing about like what sounds like with you anyway, like again, everything you did in your younger days. What was your science, by the way? What kind of scientist were you?
A microbiology.
Ooh. So like viral stuff or like cellular stuff? Like what was you doing?
Environmental microbiology. So I was studying degradation of toxic compounds.
Ooh. Guys, I am oddly interested in that, but only because of just from a nutrition standpoint. We put a lot of compounds in our environment, and it's fascinating to me how those, like, again, those compounds can create other ecological imbalances until they disappear. So I'm always fascinated that, because for those listening, those ecological imbalances can also create like nutritional imbalances, psychological imbalances. How we take care of this planet is very much it affects us on a multitude of levels that we never even really think about. So it's a fascinating thing. So cool. But what I was gonna say was, so like you said, that structure taught you, like, again, the importance of having a structure in your stories. And then when you go into fiction, it's about what you feel is worth saying or having fun. And I feel like, especially with the YA, is probably having fun, having something to say. But it sounds like you're finally getting to have some fun.
Right. And it's interesting because I used to think of research as so non-creative, and I was trying to figure out how I got from, being a scientist to being a fiction author. And then I realized what I liked most about research was figuring out how to figure out the answer. It wasn't the answer. I mean, the answer was good because that was the point. But what really got me excited was how to craft the experiment to get the answer. And that's sort of what drove me, and that's sort of a creative process.
Well, science is a lot about imagination. Like, Einstein has a very famous quote about using imagination, but part of that is, again, your problem solving. How do we deal with this thing? Well, I'll come up with, we'll say solution A, just for lack of a better term, solution A. So how am I going to get to solution A? Depending on your discipline, you're going to come up with an experiment or a hypothesis to prove it. So you got to figure out how you get there. And that takes some imagination. It takes some thought process. Like, those tools as a scientist are very much transferable into, like, fiction. They really are.
Yeah, I think they are. I think they serve me well.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, I've interviewed a lot of people. It's amazing to me. Like I usually interview people from, like, corporate backgrounds or law structured systems, and a lot of these people end up writing fiction. And so I'm not, like, entirely surprised at all anymore, because, again, if you look at fiction as again, this is like nuts and bolts stuff. If you look at fiction as a just something that just comes out of thin air, it does to some degree. I mean, you are using your imagination, but if you look at everything that exists in the world, not nature, but everything that exists into the world, someone imagined it. And we all, whether we realized it or not, thought it was a good idea, or at the very least, the best idea at the time. So the whole world's a product of imagination when you really sit there and think about it.
Definitely.
Yeah. You like that?
Start talking about subverting the normal, I guess, plot line. In my first book in the Kingdom Journal series, I did, like, a cliffhanger ending, and I was a little worried about the readers being like, "Oh, I hate this. I don't like it." But it was, to me, it was like, "Ooh," because it was leading into the next book and the next character, and I was excited for that build up. And then I had so many reviews that didn't like it. I went back and did a, like, extended edition with another chapter. So,
A cliffhanger can work. It's again, it's the India. By the way, I should ask this: are you traditional or indie?
I mean,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, you're an indie author, right? So you have the luxury of kind of picking when the sequel comes out, right? But see, I don't know. See, I think I'm a little bit more of a bastard than you are, because here's what I would have done, right? I would have kept it that way, and then I just would have been like, okay, you know what? Here, you get the solution here. I promise, in book 2, and I promise when I get to the end of it, there will be a satisfying conclusion, right? And then and then as an April Fool's gag, I send them, like, a choose your own adventure where no matter which way your characters go, they die. Like that. Like, I'm that guy. I am that guy. So I would release it on April 1st, just because it would be just like, that would be the ultimate April Fool's gag, right? Get set a cliffhanger up, release a gag book on April Fool's Day, and just to keep stirring it up, and then I deliver an amazing sequel. This is like a classic science fiction / fantasy series. Princess of Mars by like John Carter and Mars, the very first book, was ended on a cliffhanger. It ended on a cliffhanger. So did Tarzan. Edgar Rice Burroughs' first books were both cliffhangers. It was like, when you get to the end, you're like, come on. Now I had the benefit of the fact that the used bookstore was down the street, so the next week I could go get book two. But that is the one advantage of reading it in hindsight. But and I mean, you know this too, in fantasy books especially, there's lots of things that don't get resolved in books, right? 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 It's about it's can you, if they're so engaged, I would actually argue with you, if they're so engaged with your stuff that they're complaining about the cliffhanger, you did pretty damn good. Like, I'm just saying, you did pretty
Right.
damn good.
At least they paid attention for that long. My audiobook narrator loved it because I think she had like, with her narrator, they would read the last sentence of a book they narrated, and mine was one word, so she won the prize.
Yes. No, it's good, right? No, I mean, that's the thing, right? A cliffhanger can work. You have to deliver on the second book. I mean, that's the catch, right? People will give you that benefit. I hate that this is the end, right? Right? The only time that a cliffhanger sucks if it's the actual ending of the series, then we hate you forever.
Yeah,
Right?
definitely.
Right. But you can dangle a cliffhanger on us if you're going to go back to that story and tell a story, right? For me, my favorite kind of stuff is one and done's. Like, I tell a full story on the inside, right? And now if I do a future book in that series, it'll tie back to the first book a little bit. There is that continuity. But you can just get this book if you want, if you don't want to read this book. Now, no one likes that. I'm one of those. I'm the same way. I don't like doing that, but I can do that if I have to, right? I've gotten into some book series that way, but I didn't like it. But again, you have that luxury. I think of an emotional response is more important than. And if you had them, I don't know. I wouldn't have touched it. I think personally, I wouldn't have touched it.
I did it a couple years later, so it had a couple years to sit there. But
yeah, but you're like, fine, I'll give you that. I'll give you that little piece on the inside, that kind of deal.
yeah, and I just put it in the Kindle version. So it's not in the paper book. It's not in the audiobook. So
it's just you just so, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. Tricia is very much like, if you get the book, you're gonna get dangled with a cliffhanger, but it's gonna be a good one. It's gonna be a good one. So, no, I think like, oh, let's go with a big one since we're kind of just trying to break the ice here. So, when you read a book, do you deliberately try to make a reader feel a specific way?
I try to make them really engaged with the main character. I always write, or at least so far, I've always written in first person. So I want them to be right there with the main character and loving them or hating them for the good things they do or the stupid mistakes they make. I want them to feel all of that. So that's the main driver in my books. I feel like they're very character driven. I mean, they have big plots and fun escapades, but at the end of the day, it's like experiencing everything that character experiences.
First person. So I think the challenge with first person is the world building, actually, because if your character is if you're going through the character's eyes, well, the character can't see the whole world. So it's almost like you gotta be very careful. It's like, what do they know? What don't they know? Right? And how can I incorporate what they don't know without cheating? My solution in one of my books was a Twitter feed.
Oh, interesting.
Because it's part of the world, right? You can tell like and also it's fun to add little things to in the Twitter feed that fit your story, right? The characters did an incident like early in the book, and then later on it gets referenced in the tweets. It gets referenced because it was incredibly stupid what they did. It was incredibly stupid, totally stupid, but it was, like I said, it's one of those little moments like, hey, I can play with that, and it gets around the problem of my main characters don't know shit. I can tell the reader cool things without like like my main character sounding like a genius when he's kind of a bit of an idiot. Like that's kind of like that's kind of deal, right? Like when if your character is only so smart, then if they reveal important world building stuff, it's like you're cheating. You know why you're doing it, but you're cheating, right? And I think that's one of the hardest things about first person is doing incredible world building over an extended period of time.
Yeah, how I got around that a little bit. So they're called the Kingdom Journals because each book is written through the eyes of a different character. So there are 3 witches in this trinity of witches that are supposed to save the witch lines. And so the first book you see the first witch, and then the second book you see the second witch and her evolution of realizing that she's a witch and her entry into that world and that prophecy that they discover. And then the third book takes off with a different character. It's actually, I won't tell you about that one because that's a little bit of a giveaway, but the fourth book is then the third witch of the Trinity and kind of the summation of all of them coming together to break this curse.
3 witches of fate. Just curious.
3 witches of what?
3 witches of fate. Like so my first experience of 3 witches was Shakespeare's Macbeth.
Oh, right.
Right. So and 3 like 3 witches, like historically, like there's also like these 3 oracles from Greek mythology. So it's like it just ties into all of that stuff. Like I did in my Alice in Wonderland series is an Alice in Wonderland Greek mythology mashup.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, because Alice and Pandora are the same story. If you sit there and really think about it, they are the same story. The only difference is, the only difference between the two of them is Alice is like Pandora pays very dearly for it. Alice kind of doesn't. They're both mad, right? Which I think is really interesting. But if you look at it, same thing. Their curiosity leads them to go down different things, and for Pandora, it just ends in calamity, with just a little kernel of hope. For Alice, there is calamity, but now it's like what happens afterwards, right? And it's her journey to get out of the rabbit hole. So that's the difference between them, but they're the same. They're the same thing. So my second book called which is called Alice 2, Alice TOO. It puts through the looking glass and like the Oracle house, and I mashed them together.
Oh, wow.
Because I think fate's a very important part of like Greek tragedy, but also it's, to me, I think one of the more interesting questions is, if you knew everything that was going to happen to you, how would you stand in those times? Would you fight it? Would you embrace it? Would you run from it? And Alice's answer and her shadow, the Cheshire Cat, when she opened Pandora's box, is actually in her head. So it's actually her shadow, right? So they have different ideas of how to do when they realize what their fate is. And it's going to be, and that's the story for Alice too. How do you deal with fate? But it's also through the looking glass. So it's all the nutty through the looking glass stuff inside this very, so yeah, I'm like, so again, so going to your thing with 3 witches, it's interesting to me because I think that, like, again, classically speaking, I think the tie from 3 witches goes from the 3 oracles, or farther down, Shakespeare's Macbeth, who, by the way, the 3 witches there totally are the villains of that play. They totally are, right? But even though they're not in the story very much, if it wasn't for them, Macbeth never would have done what he did. And then then now you got 3 witches. And so I'm assuming they're not the nefarious, villainous type of witches. They might be more closer to the Greek oracles than say but that's where, again, story trees, right? I like learning where story trees come from. So that sounds like yours.
Yeah, I don't know how I exactly came up with the curse and the prophecy. Yeah, it started with a character that was half witch, half vampire, and although her type of character is forbidden by the witches and the vampires, but her mother is the vampire chancellor, who's the head of the vampires, so she stays hidden all her life, but she lives in the human world, hiding her witch self and her vampire self from the humans, and she lives in the vampire world, hiding her witch himself from the vampires. And somehow it grew into this trinity of witches that needed to break the curse on the witch lines. And every 100 years, there's 3 witches that are born that could break the trinity, but they have to find each other and they have to break the curse within 1 year, or they have to wait a whole another 100 years before this can happen again.
So I'm assuming there's a certain age and a certain time where this is viable.
Right. They become witches at age 18, so they have to do it between their 17th and 18th birthday.
And I'm also guessing that generally speaking it doesn't work out. Otherwise, I wouldn't keep doing this every 100 years.
Right. Up until this point, that hasn't worked out because back at the generation of time, the archangels cursed the witches to their souls had to live in purgatory forever. And so if they break this curse, then their souls can go to heaven if they're good enough witches.
I see. Sounds, yeah. I definitely think I picked the right story tree with this. So I'm assuming there's a lot of people in your series that kind of want things as they are. They like things as they are.
There is one, yes, evil villain who would rather just keep all the souls in purgatory for their own uses that we don't even know yet. That's to come.
That's the kind of, you're like, I got this all figured out. So
well, and I can't leave my characters alone. You said you write standalones. I can't even write a whole series and finish it up without doing like
you always leave room. My first trilogy, there's room for me to go back to it, although not the same way, right? Not the same way. I could do like a story in between kind of deal, or I could do like there's stories I can take place between the 3 books if I really wanted to, or I could do something. So in my very first series, there's a post-apocalyptic. Basically, it's a group of kids in this post-apocalyptic world. It's epic poetry illustration kind of deal. They meet these rock people that had survived from the apocalypse. So one of the stories that's in my head, I would love to tell, even though it's a small story. It's the origin of the rock people, right? It's something I could do in there. It's fun. Doesn't touch anything in that trilogy really. It's a neat little piece of the story. I had an illustrator. I'd love to get her back for that because I think she'd have fun with that. It's just a neat little, it would be like a mythology based story, right? Because I have a being in my thing called the Wandering God. So in his journey, he creates these people kind of by accident, and it's kind of like the story of taking responsibility for your creations, kind of, sort of. And I have a really interesting little solution to this as well. So I'm gonna it's like a fun little story. So I always have stories I can go back to, right? Because stories don't end. They never really end. There's just what we can best tell at the time.
Right, and I have this idea that these evil beings, because they were there from the beginning, they can never be truly killed because their souls are eternal, just like everyone's souls are eternal in my mind. So yeah.
Well, it's not always about. See, I think truly the story of our world is this: we don't live in a perfect world, but we live in a changing world. And I think our biggest struggles going forward is embracing the changes, right? Because that's the hardest thing to do. Like, most people don't write. I love that don't like change. They don't like movement. They don't like being uncomfortable. They like things just staying as they are. But that's not how the world works. The world is always moving. It's never stagnant. And sometimes we all get to this point sometimes, like, you know what I would like to do right now? I want to go in my bed and sleep. I don't want to deal with this shit right now.
Yeah, the past few years has definitely taught us that change is change.
Well, yeah, no, like change is inevitable. I think well, I learned a lot in the last 3 years. And now I think everybody got different lessons from this time, depending. This was technically my second apocalypse, the first big apocalypse of my lifetime in terms of worldwide, but from a personal level, it was my second apocalypse. So the big lessons I got from the first time have kind of helped me with the second one. Again, no fear, a lot of frustration, but no fear, right? So, right. But the second time around, the thing is, right, life has changed, good, bad, and different, and it's always uncomfortable. And inherently, I think we go to a better place. But the question is, like, we all kind of resist. We all have things about ourselves we like, or we're comfortable with, at least, right? To love, like, let's say, for example, your goal was to get into another relationship. I'm not saying I'm not, I don't know anything about your relationship thing. I'm just saying this is an example here, right? That may mean giving up your fear or mistrust of others. But you become too familiar with that fear and mistrust of others, you're going to want to keep it, even though what you really want requires to let go. And I think that's the real struggle. I think most bad guys, if you like, and this is how I look at most bad guys anyway, not all of them, but most of them, they like things as they are because they're on top, they're doing well, they're not necessarily they're not in a bad place. And it's typically human nature. If you're in a great place, you want to stay there.
Yeah,
Right?
definitely.
That in itself is not inherently evil, right? That isn't inherently evil. It's the means you go to stay there. If I'm going to stay there at the expense of stopping somebody else out, right? Well, maybe I've gone a little too far, and I should just let things go its natural course, right? Or that's it probably sounds like what happened with your evil beings. Is like, hey, we are awesome right now. We like this, but that's their trap too, because once you become embraced that you don't want things to change anymore, you're the one in prison, and you'll never change, and that is actually pitiable.
That's kind of insightful actually. It makes me think of it in a little bit different way because I haven't wrote this evil being's backstory yet, so it's all ruminating in my head.
Yeah, so I just gave you some ideas. Like I said, most actions, like most intentions, like the road to hell, they say is paved with good intentions. It's true. I don't. Intentions can't actually be questioned because you don't know what's in someone's heart. But more often than not, we all have the capability of being malicious. But what I've often learned is that the most malicious things I've ever done in this life have never come at me being deliberately malicious. I've had good intentions. When I made my choices, those impacts, they weren't what I expected them to be.
Right.
Right? I can't argue impact either. You can't argue intentions, but you also can't argue impact. So all that's really left at that point is interpretation. And that's where things can be debated a little bit. We both can look at things honestly. But again, it requires a certain honesty in ourselves too. Are you honest enough to admit that you fucked up? Yeah. right. But at the same time, right, sometimes, again, impact can't be argued. But how do you carry that pain with you? Are you willing to, do you want to carry that pain more than you want to move on? Right? And sometimes it's not even about that. Sometimes it's like, okay, this happened. I just don't want nothing to do with this experience anymore. That's human too, right? I mean, I don't know about you. I don't like getting my ass kicked. I don't think anyone does, right? So, if I get my ass kicked enough, I'm gonna say, you know what? You can do your thing.
Well, yeah, and your outlook is so individual, and everyone's reaction to something that happened is so individual. I mean, some people can come through the same experience and be okay. What are we going to do next? We need to move forward and fix this, or rectify it, or just move forward with our lives. And another person right next to them might come through it and say, "Oh no, I've lost so much." So there's both sides of that coin.
Oh yeah, it can break you, and that's every. So like I said, when you look at like human condition, like the humanizing your bad guys or humanizing your heroes, every hero has a breaking point. So you got to figure out what those are for your heroes, and then you got to be a bit of a dick and put them in those breaking points. See what happens. But with your villains, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, they don't come from bad places,
It's true.
right? They don't. But it's what they do from there. You know what I mean? And that for everybody is a little different.
Yeah, and I wonder as humans if we can ever truly, I mean, maybe some people can. I don't think this way, but maybe some people, I don't think I could ever make a completely 100% evil villain, because I kind of believe that everybody had some good in them, and maybe that's because that's my belief system, right? Somebody else may be able to write a villain that is completely a villain and just does it just to be mean. So
So okay, so have you ever written demigods, gods, or monsters? Have you ever tried to?
I may be writing something like that right now, but
Okay, okay. So here's how. Okay, I'll give you. I'm a comic book nerd, so the Joker is an irredeemable character, truly an irredeemable character. But the way they did that, the reason why he's irredeemable is not the secret is he's not really human anymore. Not in the sense you
okay.
or I are human anymore, right? He has become an absolute, and you can make characters absolutes. They're limited. They will never change. The Joker cannot change anymore. He is who he is, right? And that's so. Can you make a truly evil or a truly good character? Yes, but they have an inability to change. They are the thunderstorm. They are the rainfall. They are the sun. They just are, and that's a very different. That's a different kind of person. Now you can do it. Anybody can do it, but they're not usually characters that are the main characters in a story. They are the metal that tests your characters more often than not,
Right.
right? The Joker changes everything around him, changes Batman, Robin, right? Changes every character he has contact with because of his nature, but he himself never changes, right? Um, Same with a god. Someone like, say, we'll say Artemis. Artemis is Artemis. Will never change. Zeus is Zeus. Zeus is the same thing. He will never change, right? He is who he is, and that's it. Now, you can do a lot of interesting things with them, but they're not really human because again, they can't change.
Interesting insight. I like that.
Well, yeah, I mean that's it. Like, what other measurement do we have but change? Change is like that's again, we live in an imperfect world. So in a world of an imperfect world, trying to write a perfect being, perfection is simply the end of maturity. A character that cannot change cannot mature anymore. That's it. This is who they are. This is that they are a finished product. A human being is never a finished product. No matter where they go on the spectrum, they are never a finished product. Hitler loved his dog. Doesn't excuse everything else he did, mind you, but Hitler did love his dog, right? There was some humanity left in him, even at the very end. That doesn't mean that, what he did was right in any way, shape, or form. But that's the crux of it, right? We as a species, we are capable of both great things and terrible things, and all that while that struggle going both ways is eternal and in all of us. And all of us on some level let both sides of that argument win. There are things I do I'm not proud of entirely. Like, I'm not perfect. There are things I struggle with. Vice versa. I'm sure the same with you. There are things you look
Yeah.
at and go, "What the fuck am I doing? I'm so many years old. I should be." No. And when you get to the point, like, and you see this with the elderly, there's a freedom they have because they still change, but it's a lot slower. My grandmother's my grandmother, both of them. My grandmother, I love them both dearly. I love them to death. My grandmother on my mom's side is who she is. I love her. She is a beauty. She is one of the sweetest people I've ever met in my life, and she will never change. I love the fact, and also, like, on a personal note, I always say this: "Hey, Oma, happy you're Mr. Reinhardt. You guys are a great couple." Like I said, dating at 8, that's awesome. she changed. She actually made that decision to date late in her life, and she got it. And I don't know of a person more deserving. My grandmother, my dad's side, has a heart of gold. She's got some things she has kept with her whole life. She has never let them go, and it has shaped her to who she is. I look at my father, who's in his 60s. He still changes, but at the same point, there are some things about him, right? There are some things he doesn't change as easy. Now, and the older I get, the more I realize, like, that's going to be me too. Some of my fuck ups are going to be my fuck ups the rest of my life, and I'm good with that, right? I am who I am. But we all have that ability to grow and change and evolve, and that never fully stops. Even in our elder, just when we get older, we give less of a shit. So we have more fun with it. But that's why they say sometimes being an elderly is your second childhood, because it kind of is. You've learned to be at peace with yourself. Now, sometimes to your detriment. Sometimes for most of that, fuck it. I'm going to enjoy my life at this point, and anybody else who doesn't, I can kiss my white ass. That's pretty much that's how they let, or my whatever colored ass you have, right? Because that's just that I am who I am, and that's how it should be. Like that's how life is. There's always change, and change is truly the only constant in the universe. Everything else comes and goes.
Definitely.
Made you think a little bit, I can tell, about some things.
You did. You made me think a lot. I'm gonna have to start writing down notes right after that.
So I picked up a couple things about you. Let's see if I am right about some of the things I picked up about you. You very much enjoy listening.
I do. I like learning things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so you listen and you kind of put some things together, and you got this giant apparatus behind those heads that's putting together thoughts and connections. She's laughing a little bit at me, but it's true. Right. That's how you you see the world, and you let your silence kind of help you weigh and measure things.
I think I do. And it's interesting because I took a personality test one time, and they were like, well, how do you make decisions? And do you make decisions just within your own brain, or completely, or do you take things in from a lot of different places? And I'm definitely one of those people that take things in from a lot of different places and then kind of formulate where I'm going.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you helped me do that today, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's all good. No, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just one of those things I just kind of noticed and saw. It's like I think there's that. The other thing is, okay, so are you still a scientist at this point?
I'm a technical writer. Yeah.
You're a technical writer?
I don't do research anymore, but I'm a technical writer. Yeah.
You're a technical writer. So for those unenlightened people like myself, what is a technical writer?
Well, there's probably many different and I didn't lead with the main thing I do because a lot of people's eyes glaze over. There's many forms of technical writing, but what I do is I draft patent applications and file patent applications for clients. A lot of different technology areas, from barbecue grill tools to magnetometers to activated carbon. That's what I do.
So you have actually a unique insight what's going on in the world.
A little bit. I like to think sometimes about some things, not about everything, definitely.
Well, no, but I mean, here's the thing, right? You get a lot of stuff to come across your desk, right? So some things will be like a barbecue. I'm going to be silly with my next one, right? I'm an interdimensional matter transporter that makes ice cream. You'd be like, that's cool. That's cool, right? To a grill, or to a potato peeler, to a lot of mundane stuff, I'm sure. But you also, again, another proof that change is a constant. Everybody's coming up with their own ways of these tools that have existed for hundreds of years in some cases, and it's still changing, it's still evolving, it's still growing, right?
Definitely, yeah. I would think that barbecue grills, skewer tools, you wouldn't think of anything new to do with them, but there are definitely people out there that do. So.
Yeah, no, it's totally, no, I mean, that's it. And really, I mean, again, you're also talking to a bit of a Lego junkie in the sense. I think Lego's like the coolest toy in the universe. I think Lego should be a required educational tool actually, because you can teach pretty much everything from math to like basic biology, chemistry, and physics with Lego. I actually built a fulcrum for a physics class with Lego.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, you can, right? For Lego, you can build anything with it, right? So going with that principle, right? You getting to look at all these little building blocks of technology advancement, and it's almost like it's toys, right? You get to go like with all these like little toys that are, and you're privy to all this stuff because I'm sure you guys signed confidentiality agreements with some of with your clients because let's be honest, they're not
All
going
of
with
them
this.
yet.
Yeah, totally. You can't talk about this because you've signed contracts and you got paid and you're like, nope, not zero. But I mean, as fun as silly as this might sound with some of the stuff you've seen, you're always at the precipice of change.
Yeah, and I'm always learning something new, which is I love. So
Yeah. Okay. You don't have to give me what the product is. The product, because like obviously you can't do that. But pick something that you learned that did get you like even last week.
what did I learn last week?
Without giving away your product, because obviously you can't do that.
Well, I have some things that are already patented, so they're already in the public.
Okay. If they're already there, again, what you can. Okay. If you, I'll redefine this. If you can give it away, you can. That's totally fine. But if you can't, that's also fine. Just the lesson.
That's the hard one. What I learned last week. I learned something today.
You can talk about today too. What?
Yeah, they're not my clients, so I can talk about it, and it's public information. So yeah, I didn't know you could make and store energy using ammonia, and I still have to look that up to see how it works. But somebody just told me that today, and I said, "Huh, I have to investigate that because I haven't heard of it before." So yeah.
Okay. Yes, and you can. Although the reason why I know this is a
Well,
very
okay, so you're talking about green. I mean, you're talking about like gases. So, but I don't know. I don't think they were talking about it in the same way that you think. Yeah.
I'll tell you how I know, and it's gonna be the weirdest answer you're ever gonna hear. Dino poop.
Yeah. So that's I mean, yeah. As soon as I said it, I was like, never mind. People do take like
Yeah.
offshoots of cow dung and sheep dung. Yeah, and convert that to electricity, I guess.
Well.
I
So
think it was something
I have a
different. I'm not
story.
sure what they were doing. So
So I have a parallel universe, not like Parker novel I'm writing. Right. My hair's the woman. She joins. So I don't know if you know who the night. Since we're talking witches here, do you know who the night witches are?
no.
Okay. So they
Not off
were.
the top of my head. If I remember, I'll remember. But
So the Night Witches were a World War II Russian battalion unit composed entirely of women that flew wooden planes and annihilated the Germans during World War II. They were by far Russia's most successful military force during World War II. They only had like 48 casualties, and just remember they just had wooden planes, and at night, okay, no, and so here's the thing, they were perfect at night. No one could see them at night. You could hear them, but you couldn't see them. So the Germans would hear them, freak the fuck out because they were maneuverable little planes that you could not see at night. So they would do it at night. Russian women would fly these planes, bomb the German encampments and stuff like that all night. All night they would do it, and they would again. They were the most terrifying Russian unit to the Nazis, like by far. So in my story, in a parallel universe, they're flying dinosaurs and using the ammonia from dino poop as weapons of mass destruction. I know this to be. I actually asked a panel, and this is why I know ammonia does store energy because I asked a few paleontologist friends. So could dino poop be used as a weapon? And they were like, "Oh fuck yeah!" It was like it's like, "Oh fuck yeah!" And they explained why, and oddly enough, it was the ammonia. The ammonia was the whole reason why. It's just like, so if you hit somebody with dino poop, man, like from that kind of fall and distance, now could, if they didn't die, then you probably poisoned them. It was just, it's a nasty, nasty, but it's a similar concept. They're flying in, they're terrorizing. People can hear them, but they can't see them. And but like, I'm spoiling one of my current books, but that's I figure you like, it's interesting, and also I can now say I've talked about dino poop on my podcast.
There you go. Yeah, well, you knew more about that than I did, so.
Yeah, no, it's kind of cool. No, it's interesting, right? So there you go. Okay, so when I met you, you were doing psychic stuff with Katie, if I'm not mistaken.
I wasn't doing the psychic stuff. I was still talking about my books, but yeah, they did talk a little bit about psychic stuff, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, so that your thing, or just now you just kind of just happened to be there at the right time, or
no, I happened to be there, and I had some friends who produced a journal called Unfucking Your Attitude with Gratitude, but it was harnessing like mystical energy type within the journal as well. So yeah, and kind of related. That's how I related to them.
Okay. So, okay, so you're still technically right. Let's do that. I'm assuming that's usually your kind of your day job.
Yeah.
That's your day job. So but your plan is to be a novelist to take over the world.
Yeah, pretty much.
But there's nothing wrong with that. I just figure we just get our plans put together there.
Yeah, I have to go, right?
Yeah, totally. Young adult permanently, or do you want to do other genres now?
Yeah, so young adult. Yeah, I'm staying with young adult under this pen name. I do have some romances that I'm spinning off into another pen name, just to try to keep those pen names separate, and the also bots on Amazon not confused.
Well, I don't mind confusing the also bots on Amazon. That's okay. They can have their no, but I get it too. If you're you don't want necessarily erotica or just or hard.
No, it's pretty much, it's not clean, but it's pretty clean. I'm pretty much a PG-13 writer across the board. My adult romances get a little bit steamier, but definitely not erotica. So I mean, I don't really have to separate them for that reason. I just kind of wanted to separate them out so people weren't too confused.
No, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. It's just one of those things where I asked only because first off, I'm not, if there was erotica, the steamiest, that's fine. I've interviewed lots of romance writers. Honestly, no matter what genre of romance you write, it takes skill to write them well. They're not the easiest things. They seem easy until you actually have to do some of this stuff. It's like, okay, no, love stories in general. Since I'm going to say you're a PG-13 romance, that means you got a big love story thing. It's so hard not to make a love story sound so cheesy.
Yeah, I guess there is that line between cheese and not cheese, but I've kind of discovered how to do that in an easier way. I always think about the guy she's not supposed to be with as the bad guy, like he's the evil villain, and the guy who she's supposed to be with is the good guy. He's the savior, right? So
that could, you have some fun with that. See, there's a reason a lot of women end up dating bad boys. They tend like there's a reason for it, right? Because it's the bad boy type seems strong, especially at first glance.
Yeah. Well, it's not that he's the bad guy because he's the bad guy. He's just the bad guy because he's wrong for her. So
okay.
It may not necessarily be that he might not be a little rough around the edges or strong, or that might be the right guy for her. So he would still be the good guy. Whatever guy is right for her is still the good guy, right?
There has to be something that attracts, because again, Lord knows I've known this too with my own romantic history. There are things about even with the women that aren't ready for me, there are things about them I really like or really admire or really respect, right? I have to. I mean, or else I wouldn't be trying to do whatever it is I'm going to be doing with them, right? And that's just because if I don't respect them, it's going to be very blah. It's not going to be very good at all. I have to find something I really like. Now, it might not work out. It totally like that's totally like a realistic part of life. Um, but I mean, there has to be again. It's that fine line. Like going back to something about villains, right? There's that human quality. Well, with love interests, there's got to be something good about them, or else why would I don't want to think she's a complete idiot, right? You know what I mean?
Right. Definitely.
Yeah. So, what's your favorite? What do you prefer writing, the romance or the young adult?
I think it's hard to say. I like aspects of both of them because I will write, and I've written a dystopian series too, which is the hardest series I've ever had to write, like emotionally. Um, and after I finish my dystopian book, I have to go write a fun romance because it balances my it balances me out. Basically, it's after you write putting people through hell, through pandemics and whatever else, then you like write a happy love story and you get yourself out of that cave a little bit.
No, no, I get it. I totally get it. Like, so you went to dystopian, so that's a very YA thing. That's a very so I'm assuming that's YA too.
Yes, that is YA too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So is that like down the pike, or is it out now, or?
So yeah, this dystopian series, there's two books out. The first one is Lovelock Ones, and the second one is Torch. It's the Lovelock series. It's sitting there. It's a 2-book series. It should be a 3-book series that I need to finish, but it was about a pandemic, and it's yeah, I haven't finished it yet. So I kind of put that on the shelf and said, I don't think I want to write about a pandemic right now because it was eerily predictive of the pandemic we had. So yeah, I decided to jump into fae fantasy instead of writing my dystopian series.
That's understandable right now.
Yeah,
That's
I thought it
understandable.
was.
Now,
Yeah.
at some point, you're going to have to finish it, of course, but I can understand, like, I might want to wait until 2023 when we're a little saner. Like, I think we're going into, I think, the more endemic phase of the virus at this point. I don't think we're going to lock down again. I don't think we're going to do any of that stuff from this point on. I know COVID's going to be a part of life, good, bad, or indifferent. But again, the learning to live with it. I think we're going to go through the learning to live and the trauma of the last 2 years. We're going to be healing from that for the next little while. But by the time I think we get towards 2023, right, I think at that point most of us are going to be like, okay, it's done. Let's go on with the rest of our lives, and God willing, we never do anything quite like this ever again. So you know, but that's kind of how I see it, and maybe I'm wrong on how I see it, but I can definitely that's how I kind of see it going. Um, I'm in Canada. We're still a little bit farther behind than you guys in some ways, in some parts of it. Some people would argue we're ahead. I'm not so sure. Again, I look at all over the world on that, but that's neither here nor there. But I do think like we are coming to the point where we're going to be on the other side of this at this point on. I think from here on in, and how whatever happens here, unless people are dropping down the street, I think we're done. The we're going to lock everything down.
I hope so. It's yeah. I think people's psyches are ready to be free.
Well, I just think people have had enough. Like there just comes a point to you have to ask yourself again, living and dying. Yeah, life is, and again, I'm not saying that you can't die from the virus. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there comes a point in life where you got to go, well, what's living and what's dying? If I'm afraid to die, I'm dying. I'm dying on the inside, right? If I'm living, I still might die tomorrow, but I'm not afraid, and at least I lived. And that's what we're here to do, right?
That was very poetic and yeah, kind of epic actually.
I told you this is my second. This is my second apocalypse, not my first. My first apocalypse, I literally met. I don't know where you are on a spiritual inclination, so this might be just a fiction in your head, and that's cool. I actually had a like a little brief little like I was this was near the end of my time in this very hard time in my life, and I'm walking, and I lived by a 7-Eleven by in a place called Sholo, Arizona, and I'm walking out, and I'm looking. I like. There's a point where I'm at near the edge of town, and I look out, and I just see a shadow, and it's walking, and it's coming to me, and I know it's coming for me. I don't know why I know it's coming for me, but I know it's coming for me. At that moment in my life, I realized two very, very profound things. The first is that one day I'm going to die. Doesn't matter what I do, doesn't matter how I live, doesn't matter how this life goes, I'm going to die. I was 27 years old. It's kind of a very profound thing to learn at 27. The second thing I realized at that moment was that I didn't have to die right now. That whatever that was, it was far enough away, and it wasn't judging me or anything like that. It was just one of those situations like, what do you want to do? I chose to keep living because there's just too much left in this life to do, and that's just me. I want to live, and I want to do all the things in life I want to do, and that's it. Like even in the midst of this, I could like even in the midst of when this was happening, I could die crossing the street. I could spontaneously combust. I live in a mountain. Like I've said this in another podcast, a lava shark could come out of the mountain, bounce down, swallow me whole. I could get hit by a piano. If I could think about all the ways I could die, I would never leave my house. At the end of the day, like I can do everything right and still die tomorrow. So if that's the case, the question then becomes what is living? What is doing? What is being? And for everybody, that isn't a little bit of a different answer, but at the end, but where we all have in common is doing what we love and doing it with people we love. And don't let anybody, and let other people kind of do the same thing. That's it. There's no, like, it's not a magic secret, right? What the world says today about what's right, they'll completely change their mind tomorrow. We don't live in a world of, the mainstream worldview has no integrity. Ergo, it's not something that should be validated or trusted for any significant length of time. It is the agreed rules, again, going back to a world of imagination, it is the agreed rules of the moment, or at least the attempted agreed rules of the moment. It's up to us whatever we choose to do. And I'm not going to, again, neither condemning, neither like whatever. The point I'm getting at on that is once you realize all this, what else is there? You go live your life. You accept the fact that life, go stepping outside that door, is a risk. But that's what makes life interesting.
Yeah. So you pretty much told my story that I experienced at age 19. You heard me talk about suffering from anorexia, and I almost died from that. And at that point of lying on that doctor's table with a doctor screaming at me, telling me I did this to myself, I was like, you know what? I totally did this to myself. I mean, there was a point where I couldn't stop it, where it was the disease, but there was a point in the beginning where I kind of set out to, lose that weight, to, however it started was not a healthy place. And at some point I couldn't control it, but part of me could have gotten help or done something different, and laying there thinking, oh wow, I could really die right now. And then my next thought was like, no, I don't choose that. That's not what I'm going to choose. I'm not going that direction. And I made that choice. Yeah. And just like you said, like I made that conscious choice and make that choice every day. So I'm going to live my life. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Thank me. Why
No, I
thank you?
mean, just thank you for echoing that and sharing your story as well.
Well, that's it, right? Like death doesn't scare you the same way, does it?
No.
Right? You respect it because yeah, that is going to be you one day. There's one day you're not going to have a say in it, and it's kind of humbling to realize there are things that much stronger than you, and not and but at the same time, it's like part of life too. You just recognize that once you see that, it can't scare you.
It scares me for the people I love, but not for myself as much, probably. Yeah.
Oh well, again, yeah. I mean, well, again, I've not been a parent, so I can't comment. Can't comment on it. Yeah, you're gonna do everything you can to protect your kids. obviously, right? And yeah, you don't want anyone to die. You don't, right? And you never, because again, you don't want to say goodbye. You don't want to. You don't want to. You don't want some things to end. But I mean, going back to something I've said at the very beginning of this conversation, life is change, and what better indicator of that than death itself?
Very true.
Yeah.
That makes, and to lighten things up a little bit.
Yeah.
And you can tell me what type of person you are, and I'm not sure where you're following on this, but I saw a meme on Instagram right before I got on, and it said, it was just talking about authors, and it said, well, are authors sitting around crying because they just killed their favorite character, or are they sitting around going hee hee hee? And I'm like, well, I guess it depends on the author, and it depends on the day, right? So,
Oh no, some of my authors are murder junkies. They are like I had a. Do you know Anita Stewart?
I've heard the name, yes.
Okay, so
I may have interviewed her, actually. I've
yes,
interviewed several people.
no,
Yeah.
she is one of the sweetest people, but she definitely enjoys her. Like her short story collection is literally all different ways of murder. It's just like, what the hell is this, right? So, but to answer your question, it depends on the character, actually. One of my main characters in that Watcher trilogy I told you about, when I killed them, I cried a little.
No, I cry on my books all the time. So
Yeah, no, I cried at that because I knew that I would never write that character again, ever.
Yeah.
And it made me really sad because I really liked that character. I'm not naming the character, and I say I'm a little bit. You can hear my voice, right? You can hear it. There's other characters though. Oh yeah, I enjoy it a little bit. I have again in my current work in progress. There's a scene. I can't wait for it. So I took the Knights of the Round and made them evil. Right? I made them completely evil. I turned Percival into a genie.
Interesting.
The Holy Grail grants wishes in one very real way, right? Right? It does. So making him a genie isn't that far of a stretch
Yeah.
when you think about it like that, right? So he's the bad guy. So I figured out a really interesting way to screw him forever, and it's a really interesting one. And I can't wait to write it. He deserves it so. Like, you're a bastard,
Very cool.
right? That kind of thing I enjoy. But when it's a character, I want when people read that scene to be very satisfied with what I do to him, right? Right. I just do that. That's what I want. I want that feeling of. But there's other characters too. Like when you deal with them, you feel their pain when they're in pain. You feel their joy when they're in joy, right? Even the bad guys, like even the guys that are really like nefariously evil, they're fun. They can be a lot of fun, and I can sometimes I enjoy their own punchlines. Like I enjoy the fact that they're so unorthodoxly evil that the way they think and how they do things, I can get a kick. I can enjoy it like they can enjoy it. So I vicariously live through all my characters. But I'm not murder happy. I don't. I that part is like, I'm not crazy about that.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
I talked to an author one time, and she said, she finished her series, and she said either everybody was dead or the good people. And I'm like, what? Everybody was dead or like one good person left? I'm like, you killed everyone? She's like, yes, I killed everyone. The series is done. I'm like, oh no. Like, I can't even imagine doing that.
Well, see, I blame Shakespeare. We're going to go back to Shakespeare. It's his fault. Hamlet. I'm going to blame Hamlet, especially Hamlet for this.
Yeah.
Everybody died in Hamlet. I mean, everybody dies in that one. It's like, you bastard. But everybody wants to copy that, right? I don't know why, but some people want to copy. Like, everybody dies. Like, well, yeah, but it's not always the most satisfying of stories, right? It just I don't want to.
Surely.
Well, no, I mean, I don't necessarily want a happy ending every time, but I like the idea that a happy ending's possible always. If you kill everybody at the end, there's no happy ending anywhere.
No, yeah. But
Yeah.
she was a horror writer, so
Even horror has to have a little happy in it, I think. Otherwise, what's the point? Like, even like I'm not saying it necessarily a happy ending, but I think a good horror. So I think horror and YA are actually inverted. So YA like kids are. I want you to imagine like piano keys. Like that's how I decide to read horror. So imagine YA is the white keys, horror is the black keys. Okay. YA has got a lot of white keys with some black ones in there, some really dark. And the reason why it's only a little bit is because when they see that terrible thing, it usually is really terrible, right? Harry Potter, the Dementors come to mind. It's this horrible, horrible thing, right? And these kids have to deal with things adults struggle with, and that's what makes YA so awesome. Horror is the opposite. Horror's got a lot of dark keys. There's a lot of darkness, but there has to be points of light somewhere in there, or it's just not horror anymore. It's just whatever. And it's like, why am I reading this? You know what I
yeah,
mean?
I haven't read horror in a really long time, so.
You seem like a very happy, like you like things happy, if that
Oh
makes
yeah,
sense. Yeah.
definitely. I like things happy. You always get a happy ending. Yes,
There's nothing
definitely.
wrong. There's nothing.
I mean, I do put my characters through a lot. But I hate doing it. So yeah. But you have to
like,
go down to come up. So yeah.
yeah, I could just, somehow, I just, if I ever meet you somewhere down the road at a convention or something like that, I feel like you're going to be like the gentlest person in the room. It's like maybe the closest thing to a Canadian, not a Canadian. I'm sorry, excuse me.
A Canadian.
Right. I could just see that. I am Canadian. That's why I can make fun of myself like this. Right. So, but it's one of those, yeah, I could see it. Like you're just a very gentle person. You like a certain, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. It's just, you're, and you seem really at peace with yourself, which is good.
Yeah.
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 Sue, I think I could be wrong here. I'll let you figure this out. Do you think we got an interview here?
I think we got a great interview here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have fun?
I did. I had a lot of fun. I learned a lot. So I have to write my thoughts down afterwards on my evil character.
That's right. Life has changed. And that's the theme of this conversation. So, I guess what we should do is we should promote your stops, like in deep, like a little bit in depth here before we wrap up, right? So why don't you tell people where they can find you? What's your latest book? Maybe we should start there. Your latest book release.
Okay. My latest book release was To Be a Fae Guardian, and I have it over there. But the first book in the series was To Be a Fae Queen. So that's where you should
That's a big book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my longest one I wrote so far. It's 110,000 words.
Then the next time you come back on, we'll have to talk about the Fae a little bit. Like I have a bit of a soft spot because again, speaking of characters that are complete thunderstorms, usually, right, the Fae are almost completely absolutes, right?
Yeah, I didn't read a lot of Fae literature before I wrote this. So
Oh, okay.
my Fae are a little different. They're more the pixie happy Fae.
There's nothing wrong with pixie happy Fae.
Yeah, so not that you would be surprised about that, but my Fae, they live in Middle Earth, which is not the same as Tolkien's Middle Earth. I have a map. So my Fae live under our world, which is Middle Earth.
Oh, I like how you did that. Okay, that's cool. That's
cool.
They
protect the humans from all the evil spirits in Lower Earth. So yeah, but they do have wings, and they are the good Fae. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I gotta ask this question. Are you a Tinkerbell fan?
Yeah, kind of a little bit.
Yeah, it's okay. It's just something just told me. Sorry, when I think pixies, I think ultimately I think of Tinkerbell.
But Tinkerbell was she was kind of dark too. I mean, she was a little bit crafty, I should say.
She's been mischievous? Absolutely.
Mischievous, crafty, a little bit jealous.
Well, a little
of Wendy, I think.
Oh no, totally a little jealous of Wendy. But I think here's the thing about Tink. This is the thing about Tinkerbell that I think is her most that what makes her redeeming. Because again, she can't compete with Wendy. Wendy was Peter's age, and Peter was smitten with Wendy. That's why Peter took her into the world. That's why he did it, right? And also because Peter himself is a bit of, in his own way, very fey and mischievous, and right, in his own way. But in that sense, he's actually more like Tinkerbell than Wendy. And when Tinkerbell goes through, saves his life, right, right. The thing that makes her such a redeeming character is she loves Peter. She legitimately loves Peter, and she gives Peter a lot and doesn't actually ask for that much in return. If anything, right, Peter is neglectful. Right, if you actually sit there and look at that, it's the Disney stuff. The regular fiction's a little different, but for the Disney, that's the Disney story, right? Is that Tinkerbell is actually, yeah, she's mischievous, absolutely jealous, a little bit, understandably so, right? But also ultimately, when the chips are down, probably love Peter more than anyone else. And also that's ultimately why, in the story, Wendy goes home.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit different look at Tink there. I have to think
Yeah.
about that. Anyway, yes. So that was my most recent series. I do have a romance coming out under the pen name Maria Jane. And yes, Kingdom Journal series. All my books can be found at triciacopeland.com. And I'm on TikTok as well as Facebook, Instagram, all those fun things.
So we're gonna show the website here. That get it right? All right. So ladies and gentlemen, you can go find Tricia Copeland at triciacopeland.com. Go say hi. She likes happy endings, right? Right. She likes happy endings, and she enjoys, and she writes good books, and she's written a lot of them. And kudos to her for all her success, and may she continue to find some. And is there anywhere else you want to recommend besides there?
If you like podcasts and learning about books and authors, then Finding the Magic podcast is on all the major podcast channels.
So Finding the Magic podcast, does it have a website itself?
No, it doesn't have a different website. It has a different Facebook page, but not separate.
Finding the Magic podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe I'll show up someday. Maybe we'll talk books there.
That would be awesome. I'd love to have you.
Yeah, we'll talk about that off the air. Now, for those watching, for those listening, thank you for watching. Thank you for this. Let me get to my stuff here before we get to the point of calling it a day, because I know I'm a trained professional and should have this prepared prior to the interview, but I never do, and that's just my nature. So here is my latest book in the Alice series. This is Alice 1. Alice chases the Queen of Hearts over the edge of the world and ends up in the Greek underworld, where to escape, she must play croquet against Jason of the Argonauts. And in this place, Alice and company encounter gods, monsters, and perhaps most terrifying of all, themselves. Written by yours truly, illustrated by Kenzie Carr. This is an epic poem with illustrations. It's definitely a fun read. And the other thing I'm going to mention here is this, folks. So if you're an author or another creative that doesn't really want to talk about themselves, I can do it for you. I can make videos, media kits, all that kind of stuff for you. Create content for advertising, basically. It's available now, jpentelresco.wordpress.com/advertising services. Man, I can almost speak. It's like amazing. Anyways, showcasing your projects, your businesses, and yourselves. It's out now. Got some videos up there if you want to check out a little bit of what I can do. And that will do it for today, ladies and gentlemen. I got a busy week. I got 5 more. Vanessa Giunta is my guest tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. Rest of the week, I got Janie Taylor on Wednesday, Susie Vidori on Thursday. I'm doing a drink and draw with Joshua Harms Friday, and Sarah Connell piano. She's going to be a musician. She kind of had to pull out last minute, but she's back this week. We're going to have a pretty amazing week of shows. So for everybody watching, everybody listening, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Stay inspired. Keep shining in the dark. Thanks, Tricia, for coming on to the show. Thanks, Trish. You rocked. Have yourselves a wonderful day.